Hello, friends. I'm proud to give a shout out to our sponsor, the Canadian Legacy Project. Veterans Affairs Canada is very limited in its service offering to veterans, so the Canadian Legacy Project has stepped up to fill the gap. CLP develops and delivers a full suite of free programs for Canadian veterans. CLP celebrates our veterans by offering meaningful support for healing and for the transition to civilian life. Homes for Heroes, Business Boot Camp, Service Dogs, educational bursaries, equine therapy, and more are available through the Canadian Legacy Project. Find out more at canadianlegacy.org. Hello, all you beautiful souls. Thank you for joining me for another edition of Operation Tango Romeo, the trauma recovery podcast for veterans, first responders, and their families. As most of you know, I don't always have veterans or first responders on. I have people that are cool and interesting or have relatable skills and insights, which is the case today. On the show from Texas, hi, Kristen.
Hi, nice to be here. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, for making the time to be here with me. And it's going to be an interesting conversation, I think. So you're in Texas, you have an interesting background, you're a literary agent, speaker, author, coach. You've got 3 books under your belt and over 30 years in the field of personal development with a master's in counseling. So you've been through something pretty big recently, a pretty big event. Let's talk about that.
Well, we're talking about the fire, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
And recently, it's not actually recent anymore. That was in 2012.
Oh, okay. So not the current ones.
No, so with the current ones though, that's what had me. So after that fire, I can't remember exactly. I think it was in 2016, let's say. Another woman and I found each other. She had lost her home in a Colorado fire. We were both writers, and we both had an idea about putting together a book telling about women who'd experienced Colorado wildfires. And we were just starting with Colorado. But we just found each other, had this idea in common, and then edited and gathered these stories and then wrote our own stories into that book, with the idea of trying to help people know that they're not alone and all of that. And so with the California fires, though, I just thought this book needs to get in more hands, and I decided to do a little campaign, try to get the word out there about the book, because it really didn't really, just needs to be in more people's hands. So that's why I'm here today, is wanting to bring life to that.
It's really a type of peer support that you've created so
Yes,
that people can relate and see themselves in others and know that they're not alone. It's such a healing thing, isn't it?
it is. I mean, I think it's essential. I've been a part of a lot of various types of peer support groups over the years of my 35 years as both a practitioner in the mental health field and personal growth field, but also as a participant in my moving through my own life experiences. But peer support has been, I just think that it's funny, and I'm sure you know this, but I think even though there's a lot of help out there, it's still easy to feel alone when you're in it, when you're in the middle of an experience, especially if you have layers of trauma and things that have happened. It's easy to just feel like you're by yourself and no one really understands. And so just to remind people that they're not alone. And obviously, when you look at things like the California fires, people know they're not alone because they're just thousands of people impacted. But when you're
It's easy to feel alone, though, especially city
exactly.
folk. I live small town, rural now. I love it because you go to town and people talk to each other. They're not
Mhm.
scared to make eye contact, and you'll just chat with anybody. You could be at a restaurant and end up with a complete stranger at your table sitting with you and having a great conversation. And I've been at somebody else's table and I just sat down with them and just start talking. Things that do not happen in large populations. Not sure why that is, but it just doesn't. The more people there are, the less friendly they are and less connected they are to each other.
Mhm.
It's very strange.
It is.
So something big like the LA wildfires, you have a whole lot of people that are all alone,
Mm-hmm. Right.
even though there's so many of them, but people don't talk to each other.
Right. And fire is something where I know when it happened with us, there were the things that people will say that, I mean, people say all sorts of crazy things when, when encountering grief and other people's pain.
Mm.
But, people start out with, well, you had insurance, didn't you?
Oh, not helpful.
Right, not helpful. I mean, it
Not
doesn't.
helpful.
No, and I think what I found going through that was that there was a lot of information out there about losing a loved one, about dealing with your own illness, even losing a child, losing a pet, losing, some things like that. But there wasn't a lot about losing a thing and losing a home. And so it's easier to, you can kind of there's kind of this like guilt response that's built into it because it's a material item, and how dare I be so upset about losing these material things when I'm fortunate enough to have a home and all of that. They're just layers of
And for some people, maybe it is. It's just a thing,
right.
but not for everybody. The
No.
house, the studio that I'm talking to you from now, I built this, and we built this house. For us, it's not a big house, but for us, it's a dream house. And we're super proud of it and we love it. And every single morning we get up and go, oh my gosh, are we ever blessed? Are
Hmm.
we ever blessed? Just this morning, I was in the binoculars looking at in the field at a group of Hungarian partridge and a coyote walking across. And just so it's so much more than a house, it's
Right.
thousands of hours of work and blood, sweat, and tears and memories and all the choices that you made to put it together. And
Right.
it's so much more than a thing.
It's so much more than a thing. And, I've found over the years that there would be those people that would seem like they're not that impacted, but then it would hit them later in ways that they weren't expecting. And like you said, though, I mean, of course, there are going to be some people that just seem to move through it. But I think for the majority, so, a lot of people, it's just right there right away. And then other people, it is that delayed response. And, because it's long and tedious, and there are all sorts of layers to it, what you have to walk through in the process.
People just want to be helpful. And so they say things that they shouldn't out of
Hmm.
a desire. I got to say something, but I don't know what to say. So they say stupid shit.
Right. Yeah, they
When people
do.
have lost a child, well, you have others, right?
Oh my gosh.
Like, oh my God.
Right.
you know, uh, Unbelievable that somebody would utter that.
I know.
But they do all the time.
They do. Yeah. And it's like you said, I think it's just our discomfort. We don't know how to be with grief, and it's that wanting to say something, so you say something, but it's not doesn't land well. It doesn't
Not
help.
helpful.
Yeah. They're in a better place. Like that one is not helpful. It's one thing if you say, if you've lost a loved one, they're in a better place, but it's a whole nother thing if someone else says it to you. Um, but with the house, it's the insurance. It's, just, I can't even remember all the things that people said in the beginning, but that was the biggest one. Well, oh no, someone, I remember we were on the site, uh, and it looks like I mean, it's, just ashes. There's scraps of things, twisted metal, no trees. The trees are burned, all the beautiful evergreens. They're just all the needles are gone. It's just this blackened forest. And someone, we were sifting through the ashes because my husband he was on a business trip and he had left his wedding ring. And we had actually heard stories about people finding rings in the ashes. So we decided that was our main motivation, to sift through the ashes. And we had this group of friends helping us, and we had it all set up where these tables with screens, and so people would bring items and try to just see what was there. And we found that, a lot of, I call them treasures now. I mean, they're just, kind of warped pieces of metal or glass and little fragments of pottery and things like that. And we never found the ring, but we had this group of friends helping us, and one day this person came up, and he's standing looking at all of this, and he said, "It must be so freeing not to have any stuff." And I'm thinking, that is not the experience right now. The experience is not one of being free.
I was just thinking about exactly that. So what the people that listen to the show a lot, we talk about these types of things a lot and what to say and what not to say. Um, and there's a time and a place. So when it's acute, the only two things to say are, "I'm sorry, that must be hard," and "How can I help?"
Mm, yeah,
And that's it. Shut up. That really sounds hard. Oh my goodness, I can't imagine. How can I help? How can I support? And leave it at that.
right.
And but later, when the dust settles, that's the time for reflection. And I've heard fire survivors talk about exactly that, how it felt like a weight was lifted off them. In a strange way, there was a cleansing attached to the Buddhist philosophy of you don't own things, things own you.
Hmm.
And did you experience anything on the positive side?
I mean, yes, I did, but I'll just back up and say the I wrote a lot about that. I was a writer prior to this
Mm.
experience, but when it happened, I just turned to my blog and I wrote over 100,000 words, which as a writer is a substantial amount. And it just every
Hmm.
day I would open my computer and it would just about 1,000 words would just pour out of processing and the confusion and all of that. And I talked a lot about that non-attachment, and it just. I think someone suggested it too early, and it was. I mean, I was someone who was a meditator, have studied Buddhism and all of that, so it's not that it wasn't a foreign concept,
Too soon.
but too soon. And I just was. Yes, I was attached to that house, and there were a lot of
Yeah.
reasons. We had lost a pregnancy before finding
Mm.
that house, and that house became. It really was the end of our attempting to have children, and that house became our expression, our child, really, our kind of. We've poured our love and our blood, sweat, and tears into this house, and a lot of it, I mean, literally by hand, my husband working on this house. And it was a type of house that it was not a good house for children, so it was this kind of. It was so many things. That house, I swear, that house had a soul. I mean, I've lived in a lot of houses, and a lot of different places, but this house was special, and the land was special. And so, I think I wrote something called "Holy Non-Attachment" and was talking about, like, no, I'm not even going to attempt to practice this. But it led to moving on, and we would not have chosen to leave that house. So in a way, we were kind of, because we loved it so much and it was so special, we wouldn't have moved on. It would have taken, I don't know what it would have taken to have us move on. And we ended up moving to a different town, and then finding another beautiful kind of soul home again, which actually just recently we're putting on the market. And I don't think, so there's some kind of. I attach to things. I just am one of those people. I just attach to things and to people. uh,
Were you able to move on eventually,
well,
fully?
uh, what's move on mean? I mean, I think that's
Well,
what.
that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, right. I think we need to, as we talk about PTSD then.
Mm.
So I'll just say, back to putting the current house on the market is a way of knowing I am choosing to let go of an attachment of something that I'm very attached to. I mean, we live out in the middle of nowhere. We live on 40 acres. We back to open space. It's kind of we called it the 50-year-old version of the house that burned, because we were in our 30s and 40s there, and now we're in our 50s approaching 60. And so, now being willing to let go of that and kind of look at what's next is, I would say that's a sign of growth. But as far as moving on, it's, I mean, I'm sure we're going to talk about a lot of things, but I had a kind of all systems haywire event in the summer of 23, which was really a culmination of a traumatic event happened, and it everything kind of everything prior, it snowballed, and it wiped me. I mean, I had a mental health crisis that summer, and it really, so, move on. I'm moving on now, but I think I had to have this kind of breakdown where there was just, the system became overloaded by a lifetime of things happening, including the fire. And then, I was always dealing with things because I have a background in counseling, and I've always been doing work, but I was kind of limping along in a lot of ways, and then had this crisis happen. So then it's really been moving on from that. So, as you know, it's complex. It's, trauma
When
winds
you
its.
started when you started to struggle, were you able to identify that in yourself? Was that
Well,
self-awareness there?
yeah, I mean, I knew I was struggling. And I'm sure, and it was an event that triggered an old trauma response,
Hmm.
and that trauma response took over my system, and in such
Yeah.
a big way that, at the time it was about survival. It was really about, I mean, I was suicidal. It was about survival. um, and uh, I haven't talked about this, as I haven't done any kind of publicity, so I haven't talked about this at this level of public. But when you're in it, like, I know intellectually, my amygdala, I was having an amygdala response. I was experiencing what it felt like to have early childhood trauma and re experiencing that. But it had been so locked away that I didn't, and when this event happened that triggered all of that, I was just trying to survive.
Yeah.
And so that, and I got help, and and I mean, I knew to get help. I knew that I had the self-awareness, but I was also at the same time overwhelmed by my nervous system, but also in some moments fascinated by the nervous system, by what it can. I mean, it's one thing to say you're an amygdala hijack right now, and it's another thing to actually experience it and be, there really aren't words when you're in it.
People don't understand suicidal ideation. Even people that have them. I survived a suicide attempt in 2021, and I didn't see it. Well, I saw it coming, but I thought I had it handled. I didn't think I would actually do it. But I did. I took a crack at it, much to my surprise, because there was just a state of overwhelm and disassociation, and there was a breaking point. But I thought I had it. I didn't think it would get that far, but it did. And people who haven't been to that brink, uh, they treat it as if it's a rational thought, as
Yeah.
if it's a rational action, and it isn't. At least not for me, it wasn't.
No.
And when you're in that state of complete overwhelm, you just don't think right. Your brain's busted,
Yeah.
and you need help. It's not that you want to die; you need relief.
Yeah.
And if tomorrow isn't looking any brighter than today, the thought of another day of it is just too damn much. And it's not a weakness. Anybody's susceptible to that. If
Right.
and it, there's a lot of people that say, "Oh, never, never me." I say, "Wait for it."
Right.
You if you think it's never you, you're just wrong,
Right.
because it can happen to anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And for me, it was like you said. I mean, it's not. It was. I was driving. I found a trauma treatment center, and it wasn't the kind where, I mean, I got sober when I was 23, and I went to treatment centers where, well, back then we didn't have cell phones, but the kind of treatment centers where they take away your phone and you're, like on a regimented schedule. I wasn't. On the summer of 23, I knew I could not deal with that level of, structure, constriction, I should say.
Mm.
I went to a place that had a little more freedom, and I was able to drive there myself. which was, positive and negative. But as I was driving there, I live in Colorado. That's my home base. I am in Texas right now, but I was driving up to the Aspen area and driving over Independence Pass, and I did not foresee this happening, but as I was driving, that the urges were so strong to just drive over the edge. And I'm always thankful that I think those of us that, and we're so fortunate that those of us that can walk through that and see, hold on enough, that I had enough of a life force that was saying, don't, but it was literally having to hold on to the wheel to, and actually smacking myself in the face of just, this is just be here, be here, be here, just drive. There's, but that utter, I mean, like hopelessness, that word doesn't even describe it when you're in those places,
Hmm.
I mean, hopeless and but system overwhelm, and because I've been on a mental health journey or a personal growth journey for so long, I have a lot of tools. There was a level of shock about how far down I went and how scary it got. And, my biggest thing was I felt like I was going to lose my mind. I felt like I was going to just, that I was right on that brink of going over into no control, being lost. And I feel like words are so inadequate to describe what that feels like. But
I get that.
yeah.
In the world of first responders and military veterans, especially combat veterans, there's such a strong um, resistance to admitting that it's a problem. There's such a
Hmm.
strong sense of doesn't matter what happens, I've got this. I can handle this. I don't need help. And getting to the point where you finally say, "Oh, okay, I do need help. I can't do this on my own." That's what happened to me in 2017.
Mm.
And that 1,000-pound telephone, picking it up and asking
Right.
for help, it's one of the toughest, bravest things I've ever done. Because I've
Hmm.
been fiercely independent my entire life. I raised myself. I was raised by wolves, and that's the story of so many that are first responders and military veterans. They raised themselves. They figured it out themselves. They're the ones that help others. We don't need the help.
Right.
So what happens is either you've hit rock bottom and you find the strength to go, oh shit, I need help. I can't do it on my own. Or you die.
Hmm.
Those are really the two choices. And I think most suicides that we see are folks that just rode the I can do it bus all the way to hell,
Hmm.
all the way to the bottom.
Right.
And that's big part of that is the stigma and culture, which is
Hmm.
why one of the big reasons I do this show, because the more we talk about things openly, the less stigma exists.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was just going to say that too. The stigma, I think we're so much better as a culture. There's so much more talk now about trauma and mental health issues, but it doesn't mean when you're in it, you're not saying, oh, there's less stigma. It's
Yeah,
still not
that's right.
something, I mean, it's not a way I don't bring up in conversation, well, the summer of 23, I went to a trauma treatment center and I was suicidal and thought I was losing my mind. It's just not dinner table conversation. I mean, it's kind of dinner table conversation I want to have. I want to be with people that are willing to talk about it, but it's still not mainstream enough, where it's still this, I still don't do that, so and I haven't really talked publicly about it. And so, it is still that kind of protecting that part. But I do want people to know, it's that when you're at your ultimate bottom, at the worst you feel like you can be, you really can, there really is help. I mean, there really is. It's just,
There's so many professions that it is a requirement that you have at least a standard level of first aid and CPR. whether it's industrial, military, first responder, a ton of school teachers have to have first aid and CPR. And yet it's not mandatory to have mental health first aid
Mm-hmm.
in order to identify a crisis in yourself or in others, and then what to do about it. If we were to do that and have mental health first aid as common as first aid CPR, that would save so many lives
Mm-hmm.
because people would be able to recognize in themselves, okay, I remember hearing about this. It's time for me to ask for help because this is the danger zone. This is not normal. This is not okay. And this is exactly what I was taught in that course, that now is the time to ask for help. This is what that looks like. This is who I ask. This is how I ask, and this is what I can expect. That's what has to be everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And until that happens, and I think it could happen. It's on a very, very small scale right now, but it's started. It's a
Mm-hmm.
beginning. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's great. I love mental health first aid. I think that that's an amazing idea, and concept. And yes, just again, how do we get past it's better than it was as far as the conversation? I know when I was early in my uh, journey, since really 1989 is when I got into 12 step programs. And so I've been on a journey since then. Uh, but trauma was, it just, I didn't I didn't think that I had trauma in my life until it was probably, I think in 2021, I was finally able to start putting some things together and realizing I could call it trauma. And, that's a long time from 89 to
Mm-hmm.
2021. And the signs were there. But it was just, it felt like, well, you might have trauma because, being military, that's what trauma is. PTSD, military, that level. And now the word trauma can be overused. Everything can be a trauma, but I think we're at least heading in the right direction. But I think we need exactly what you're talking about, where it is just part of the,
we
it's a,
we are in that awkward spot where
mhm,
I hear comedians joking about it because everything's a trauma now, and yeah, that's true. Sometimes it's just life. It's not trauma. That's just life.
right.
And I try not to be a dick about it. By doing comparative, my trauma is bigger than your trauma.
Hmm.
I don't want to be a dick. At the same time, you got to draw the line somewhere between, okay, this is a traumatic event and that's just fucking life,
Right.
you know? But either way, even if it's small to the average person, it's a small event and it crushes you. It's still information. It's still information that says, okay, well, there's issues here. And the issue is not the issue. what this small thing that just crushed you is not what crushed you. Something happened before this small thing
Right.
that put you in a position where you were so vulnerable that just a little flick and you melt down.
Hmm.
So let's figure that out. What happened before the flick? Why did that flick feel like a bowling ball? What's going on?
Hmm. Right. And I think, yeah, like you said, it's a weird time because I think I don't know how old you are, but we are.
We're about the same. I'm 54.
Okay. I'm a little older than you are, but not much. 50, I think I'm 58. Yes, I'm 58 for 2 more months. But, so our generation, we understand what each other is talking about, but then there's kind of this younger generation that is this, the trauma is everything. And so, I wonder how
you
that,
you mispronounced my name. It's trauma. It's like no, no, it's not.
yeah, right. And
That's
so
life.
hopefully it won't damage the progress that has been made in this arena, because it can create a backlash where then there's people are fatigued with hearing about people's trauma. I mean, mental health
Hmm.
professionals are not, but the general public can just, and there are people who are like, there are people that are reacting to trauma and life events and calling it trauma. But then for some people, those life events are trauma, and it's really hard to figure out what's what. But if it's overused, hopefully we will kind of come back
Well,
to.
the people that call the small things trauma are, for the most part, people that love to be a victim, I
Mhm.
think, because being a victim makes you special. It means like, hey, look at me, I'm a victim. Therefore, how about some attention over here? How about some extra loving in this direction? I want your attention and the spotlight to be on me. That's why they do it, I think.
Mhm.
And if small things really do set you off, how lucky are you? How lucky are you that you've never experienced big things?
Right.
And on the other side of it, like I've been through, like you don't know me, so you don't know the story, and you haven't listened to a lot of episodes of the show. So, but uh, broad strokes, everything from being adopted at birth, molested for 5 years between the ages 7 and 12, raped at the age of 17, and then I was in a war when I was 24, and then everything else that came along with that. Dad used to use me like a pinata, smacking me around. So it's the full gambit,
Mhm.
you know. And there's people with lots more, 10 times what I went through.
Right.
But the point is, I don't bemoan any of it.
Yeah.
It's every single thing that happened put me in a position today to be stronger, more empathetic, put me in a position, even the suicide attempt in 21, put me in a position where I can now understand and empathize even more with people that have gone right to the edge.
Mhm.
Now I'm credible with those folks because I've been there too.
Right.
And so I see it as a gift. Does it suck? Yeah, it
Mhm.
sucks. But in the infantry, we used to say, embrace the suck, because when it's cold, wet, raining, you haven't eaten for a couple of days, and it's absolutely brutal conditions, and you wonder if you're going to die of hypothermia, and then you don't die, you survive. That's what sitting around the table in a warm building when you're dry with a cup of coffee feels better and more wonderful and incredible than anybody else can possibly imagine.
Mhm.
Like it gives you that contrast, but it also gives you that a sense of, oh my God, I can go through anything.
Right.
And like, holy shit, am I ever resilient?
Right.
And that's why infantry guys have a swagger that Air Force guys don't.
Mhm.
Like you see it in how they walk, talk, carry
Mhm.
themselves. Um, you look at the other extreme, stolen valor fellas. I just ran into another one yesterday. They always like to be special forces. Uh, this one pretends to be British SAS. Just saw him yesterday. I still haven't called him out, but uh, they do that because they've never actually tested themselves,
Mhm.
and they hate themselves for not testing themselves. So they think they can do it. I could be a Navy SEAL. Nobody knows that. Nobody, unless you actually did it. Nobody knows if you could have passed my battle school unless you actually did it. We started with 18, graduated with 5. So everybody thought they could do it. Only 5 of us actually did it.
Mhm.
So you don't know until you've tried it. And that's where you get the braggarts, which is really just people that are tremendously insecure because they never tested themselves. So the moral of that ramble is embrace the challenges, see them as badges of honor, see them as, oh my God, look at me, look at what you've survived. Are you dead yet? Then you survived it, and you look at you. You're a survivor. You're tough. You're resilient, and I see it as a gift. You don't see it as a gift in the moment.
Yeah.
In the moment, it's
Right.
pretty shitty.
Right.
But in the rearview mirror, if you can heal from it, if
Mhm.
if you can heal from it, it makes you a better, stronger, wiser person. Wow, that was a rant. Sorry about
Yeah,
that.
well, thank you for sharing all that. I appreciate it, and I'm so sorry for everything you went through. And
I'm not. I'm
well,
glad for it.
and yes, but I mean, as a heart to heart, just saying the
Mm.
pain that you experienced is that's an immense amount of pain, and yes, you turned it into doing this, and
I turned it into the show.
yeah, having a purpose and reaching
Yeah.
other people, and like you said, people will talk to you and people know you've earned your stripes. You have earned your stripes. You've earned your place at the table,
Yeah.
um, on a lot of different levels. I mean, military and then childhood trauma and, all of that. So a lot of people will feel like they can trust you and relate to you. And, I think that having, when we can turn it into a purpose, I think is really, really helpful. I think, sometimes it can be these kind of ambiguous threads that kind of pull us down, and kind of can keep us in the murk. And even though I did so much work, that's how I felt for so much of the time, is this kind of murkiness that I couldn't really identify. But my childhood sexual abuse was I didn't remember, and
Mm.
I was sure that it hadn't happened. And especially as the years went by, and I worked in that field, I worked as a victim advocate for the state attorney's office, and then I worked in treatment centers where I worked with victims of sexual abuse, and um, I just I was sure it wasn't part of my story, and it wasn't until it was like the system was finally ready to start giving me memories, and things started to make sense of why did I struggle so hard for all those years. I worked so hard, I had so many tools, but I just struggled, and that I continued on, after the fire, and just that I just would keep going. I mean, I have a phoenix tattoo on my shoulder, phoenix rising. It was always that I was always rising and moving through things, but there was this underlying kind of swamp that I didn't know what it was until I did, but I think that can happen too for people, is where you don't really know, and maybe they haven't found that purpose, like whether it's writing or just helping people in some way, shape, or form, doing a podcast and working in the, helping profession, working as a first responder, all of those things. Sometimes I think if you don't have a purpose, that stuff can just still be this, I'm in a transition period a little bit where I'm trying to redefine what is my purpose. And I can feel
Mm.
some of that old stuff kind of it's like in the water, just a little bit of that old dragging down feeling, where it's just like a low level, operating a kind of a low level depression, and I think that that's what a lot of people with kind of complex trauma can suffer from, is that it's just kind of always there in a way.
Well, your story can be a boat anchor around your neck, or it could be your platform.
Yes, that's well said.
So I've turned it into my platform. And like you said, it's what gives me the credibility and relatability.
Hmm.
That old saying, I just worked this out in my head as we're talking. Um, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's almost right. If you put in, if you can heal from it.
Hmm. Right.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger if you can heal from it. And that's the caveat. If you don't heal from it, it destroys your life.
Right. Right. Yep.
So, um, the work that you do, uh, let's talk about your three books. What are they?
Okay. Well, the first book is called Waiting for Jack. And I wrote that book in 2008. And it was when I caught myself literally waiting for Jack Canfield of Chicken Soup for the Soul. I had uh,
Best-selling author on earth, other than
best-selling author on
Jesus.
earth. Right. I was at a period of my life where I was kind of really motivated and really just trying to step outside the box of what I had done previously. And I had a master's in counseling at that point and had been working in that field and then was kind of life coaching, but I felt like I was still living within parameters, and probably because of what we're talking about. And I did this course and I kind of had all these breakthroughs, and I want to write books and I want to do speak and I want to do this. And I had this inspiration. Well, one day when I had seen Jack speak, and I had gone up afterwards and asked for his email address, his card. And I would write him these, and he gave it to me. And I would write him these emails telling him what I was creating in my life. And he would write back these one liners and saying things like, keep thinking and playing bigger. It's much more fun that way. Love, Jack,
But
And
he
so
would take the time to do it. That's
he would.
amazing.
Yeah, he did.
What
And
was his partner's name? Mark something.
Mark Victor Hansen.
There you
Yep.
go.
Yep. And to make a very long story short, Jack lives in Santa Barbara, and I was going to be out in that area, and I thought, oh, we'll get together and have coffee. It was just this naivete that was very, very sweet. And so I wrote him and said, I'm going to be out there. And then I wrote him again, and I didn't hear from him. And I found myself getting obsessed, just kind of this like obsession of I've got to hear from Jack, and why isn't he getting back to me? And I'm checking my email, send, receive, send, receive. And I thought, wait a minute, what am I doing? Why am I waiting? Why am I waiting for Jack? And I thought, waiting for Jack? I'm going to write a book called Waiting for Jack, all about why we wait in life and what stops us. And it was, You Don't Know Jack was about being willing to let go of all, kind of beginner's mind, let go of all we think we know. Jack and Jill is about relationships. Jack of all trades is about our search for career and purpose. So it was like this idea just kind of downloaded. And then I had to deal with writing because I was not a writer. But I threw myself into the world of nonfiction, book proposals, and wrote this book. And again, long story short, I went to this big event.
Did Jack read it?
Well, yeah. So I had written him and said, this book is not about you, but it's inspired by you. And I went out to, it was called Book Expo America, is the big trade show in the book world. And it was at the LA Convention Center. And this was 2008 or 9 or something like that. And I went out there with my book proposal and my hopes and dreams, and then got out there and realized there were 20,000 other people with their hopes and dreams. But I walked away from that, kind of the stars lined up. I mean, I just, I am,
I just got to ask, in that time frame, were you aware of the 3 Feet from Gold event and Gregory Scott Reed?
That 3 Feet from Gold sounds familiar.
So Greg Reed wrote the book 3 Feet from Gold. It's like a sequel to Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. And he did a documentary on the writing of the book. And some of the people that showed up were Mark Victor Hansen and that whole crowd, right? It's a small community.
Yes.
I was an associate producer of the movie. So I showed up for that, which just means I invested. I gave him a stack of cash so he could, cause it's not cheap, but all the travel and everything else. So I got to meet these people in the VIP lounge kind of thing. And it was interesting. But Jack wasn't there, but Mark Victor Hansen was there. So I thought maybe you might've been at the same event.
Well, and you probably heard of Book Expo America.
No, actually, I'm not familiar with it.
During that period of time, that was Mark's event, and he would gather people in the nonfiction writing world, and teach you how to write your book and write a book proposal and get publicity and speaking. And they would have all these people come in at these events. So I was very involved with that and going to all of those kind of things. I was just determined to get this book out in the world. And I did get the book out in the world. Jack wrote my foreword for the book. I got some momentum, but I was, that was when I had my own radio show. And I mean, it was really an amazing time. But that was, then it kind of went to my house burning down. So it was like this big, all this energy and effort. And I found my purpose, and all of this and I connected to all these people, and then the house burned down, and it really just it leveled me. Um, but my other books have been kind of after that. My second book was a rewrite of that first book, but I told stories about the fire and walking through that. And then the third book is the Phoenix Rising, stories of remarkable women walking through fire. And that was the compilation book. So I have two more books on in production, but they've been in production for quite a while. So I've been in the place where I help other authors and writers through. I've been in that kind of stuck place of not not getting that done. But I have a big plan for this summer. So
My third one, I've started. I don't know how many pages I have written, but I've started and then went, nope, that's wrong, and put a different title on it. Go from a different angle. Nope, that's wrong. I've got a lot.
wow.
I've got half a dozen titles for it. I know the title now, but and it's a much simpler approach now. I know what I'm doing,
Hmm.
and when I'm ready, I'll know when I'm ready, and I'll probably pound through it and get it done in 6 months. But the next one's the big one, though, and the next one's the one that matters, and it'll be my third. And like I was saying to you, I'm actually going to go find an agent, and I'm going to get it published. I I know what the publishers want and what they're looking for, so I will make that package. But they also want it from somebody that where it makes sense that they can get behind, because everybody and their dog's writing a book.
Exactly.
Which for everybody that doesn't write a book, they think, no, what are you talking about? I've never even met an author. There's like a million a year.
Yes.
Like there's a million new books every year. There's a lot, and most of them sell like 150 copies
Hmm.
ever in their lifetime max. So I've sold more than that. Pretty happy about it. But the next one's the one where I'm going to do what you're doing right now, which is get on everybody's podcast, be a guest, and promote the heck out of that book.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. Well, when
when
you
it's
get
time, I'll know.
yeah, and when it's time, you reach out to me because we should, I am kind of stepping away from agenting because of that whole everybody's writing a book and it's so hard to get someone a publishing deal and
And
even
everybody thinks they can write, and they can't.
right. And it's very frustrating for authors, but it's also frustrating as an agent because I get as many no's as authors do. And that's hard too. If the world is changing, the publishing world is changing. So, but I'd love to, if you want to reach out to me when you're ready, could give you any ideas I might have.
When it's time, I will remember that. It's it's a big job.
It is.
There's people that say when you go publisher shopping, you think you just go to Penguin and they'll just fall in love with you and go, "Oh, can't wait."
Right.
It's like not unless you're an established name, not
Exactly.
unless you're already famous and they know that they can sell.
Exactly.
Other than that, good luck. Expect 200 publishers to tell you no. Is that about right?
Yeah, I would say I pitched a memoir project that I really believed in, and I pitched it for a year and a half, and it was 60 something editors that I specifically pitched to, and it didn't get a deal for this client. And had people looking at it. So that's my job, is to get someone to look at it. Their job is to have it be good enough that then they get a yes, and all those things that you said. I mean, it's the built-in following. I mean, someone has to have a following when they
Yeah.
come with a nonfiction book.
Well, because of my show, I'm pretty sure be able to get picked up, this time.
Yeah,
And I've got a pretty good list of people that can do a forward for me and things like that. So
that's great. Yeah, I mean, my first book was when I had my radio show, and that was such an amazing thing because I got so many blurbs from people I had interviewed. I was so connected at that point. So it's really good what you're doing.
yeah, when it's time, and it might even sell more than 1,000,
That's right.
which would be awesome. I've sold about 2,000 copies of my first book. I have no idea about the second book, and yeah, but it's about sharing the story.
Hmm.
When I was in Houston, just in December, I got together with somebody that I served with, and I haven't seen him since the war in '94. And he told me that my work saved his life in not so
Mm.
many words, and that he'd be dead if it wasn't for the work that I do. And that's something. And I've got a lot of stories like that. So it keeps me going.
Yeah.
And, but you have to meet people where they're at. And for a lot of people, that's a book, not a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to take everything from the 330 some odd episodes and condense it into book form because it helps people, not because, oh, look at me, I wrote a book. It's like,
Right.
it'll be the third. It's no big deal. I'm already over that. But meeting people where they're at gives me, if I can help just a few more people
Mm-hmm.
see a little bit of hope and see a light at the end of the tunnel, that's the goal. That's why I'm doing it.
That's really, that's wonderful. And like you said, even if it's just, I mean, hopefully it reaches thousands and thousands, but you know, if it reaches a few and saves a life and you get to hear that, I mean, isn't that enough? Because that's, I mean, that's a whole nother part of our culture is the, it's never enough, you know, the success driven culture. And I think in the book world, it's easy to fall into that and
Oh,
measure.
people think if they never sell any copies that they're a failure, and that's
Right.
so not true.
No.
I mean, yeah, there's a million a year, but that's a million out of 8 billion.
Right. Right.
So it's still a small amount relatively.
Mm-hmm.
If you write a book and you get it to the point where it's actually on Amazon, you're in pretty thin air there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's it's a million, but a million ain't a lot. And you're in pretty select company, and it feels good to have done something. It's kind of like getting a university degree.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole lot of work.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, you get to put that up on the wall and go, I did that.
Yep.
Like we were saying earlier about embracing the suck. If it wasn't hard, it doesn't feel good. If it wasn't hard, if it wasn't difficult, there's nothing to feel proud of.
Mm-hmm.
You know, embrace the struggle. And writing a book is a lot of freaking work.
It is.
You know, the multiple rounds of editing and the learning curve, especially for the first one, it's a lot of work, and you probably suck at it.
Right.
And you don't know that until the editor keeps throwing it back at you, and you're like, oh my God, I have no idea how to write. But it's,
Right.
if you can power through, the end result feels pretty damn good.
Right. You know, so much of my job when I was coaching authors is sounds like I'm trying to talk people out of writing their books, you know, but it's really trying to have people get present to exactly what you were saying of just that it's really easy to say, I want to write a book. Or, you know, people say, oh, you know, my friends, my family, people have always told me I should write a book. You know, that's a very common thing, but it's a whole nother, and I'm a believer, and it sounds like you are too, of that if you're going to write it, put in the time, put in the work. It's a legacy project. It's not that whole kind of book as business card. You know, that's just not, that's not why you should be doing it. You know, I mean,
No,
yeah,
not why. It's a. I mean, it's true. I've said those words. The world's best business card is a book because that's what I was taught, and it
right.
is true. But that's not why you do it.
No,
It's the added bonus. It's
yes,
a bit of gravy. It's the best business card in the world is a book.
yeah,
It the word author is the root of authority.
mm-hmm.
So to be an authority, be an author. It's people think that experts write books. Well, books actually create experts.
Exactly.
Like it works in both directions,
Yeah.
and uh, and you become an actual expert if you are writing on a topic. That's what the writing process does
Mm-hmm.
because of the amount of research that you have to do. Want to be an expert on something? Write a book about it. You'll become an expert by the time you're done the book.
Right. Yeah, if you really take it on. Yep. Yeah, so I'm still a big believer in, you know, people, but I just want, I always just, it's so funny because on my initial calls with people, it just sounds like, you know, I'm talking myself out of a job. I'm talking myself, trying to talk them out of a book. But, you know, I'm writing a book the one I have a book on writing a book, and it's actually my coaching programs and all of that into book form. But the first line of it is, "The world of books will break your heart."
Oh,
And
yeah.
and my writing group didn't want me to put that, and they said that's just too discouraging. And I said, well, just wait and see. And now they're further. One is published, one's about to be published, and they've walked through it, and they've had their hearts broken, they've seen how tough it is. And then, even when in a way, it's like the diploma, but it's like a child too, because once you don't just put it out into the world and forget about it. You have to keep maintaining that relationship. And if you want it to be read, if you want it to be, if you want, and this is why I'm doing with Phoenix
When
Rising.
Rich Dad Poor Dad was published, and it had a life. First, it was Sharon Lecter and Kiyosaki did it together, and then
Mhm.
Kiyosaki bought out Sharon, and just went solo. But when it was Sharon and Robert Kiyosaki at the same time, I mean, they got on every radio show they possibly could, and it was press release after press release, and interview after interview, and relentless for a couple of years. That's what it took.
Mhm.
So, like, if you actually want it to sell, it's you can keep hoping that it's going to catch fire, grassroots, and just go word of mouth. Well, you can keep hoping for that. That's probably not going to happen. If you have to just be a publicity machine,
Yeah.
and it's a lot more than a couple of Facebook posts. Like, it's so much more.
It is. And a lot of most creatives, that is so opposite of their personality, and they don't want to
Because it
have.
feels disingenuous.
It feels disingenuous. And it's still, I mean,
Yeah.
even though I know this book that I'm talking about, this Phoenix Rising, it's 21 women's stories. It's not just my story. I co-edited it with this other woman, Leslie, and I have a story in there. But even promoting that feels like, it's just this weird thing that happens. Like, I don't, I tell my clients, I teach people how to promote themselves, and how important it is. When is the best time to start promoting your book? 2 years before you write it. I know this, but the doing of it is a whole nother thing. It's the,
So I've got a question for you.
yeah.
My second book was a compilation book. When I was a realtor, I put together the Home Seller's Bible for owners, agents, and investors. And I got together to cover publishing costs. I said $1,000 each, and you get your chunk of the book. So got everybody, because it's a big team that you got to know about. There's a lot of different things, a lot of different specialties. So the lawyer, the mortgage broker, even for rural, the person that drills water wells and things like that. Put them all together. They wrote their bits. I did the heavy lifting, authored about half of it. The compilation of authors did the other half, and put it all together. Now, what I was expecting, and you'll probably giggle because of how stupid I was, but I was thinking that everybody's going to push the book just as much as I was,
Hmm.
all these contributing authors, and they were all going to integrate it into their business, I explained to all of them how to do it and how to make it the core of the center point of your marketing. Not one of them did it.
Hmm.
10 contributing authors, not one of the 10 used it as a marketing piece. Is that probably doesn't surprise you?
No, that doesn't surprise me. Um, you know, my book, The Phoenix Rising, was a different scenario where, I mean, your book was a perfect setup for all these people to market themselves, kind of the purpose of it, to give the information, and then, but this great avenue for all those people to do that. Phoenix Rising was about women, this is the sadness. And of course, they wanted to get it in other people's hands, but it was a slightly different scenario than yours. But no, it doesn't surprise me. And I think it's all the things we're talking about. It's that reluctance to promote ourselves. It's the time
Mm.
factor. It's you know, the lack of belief in people, in themselves. It's so many avenues. It takes a special being to really not give, a Jack and a Mark are just two people who they were relentless. And still, I mean, Jack Canfield is still their posts still, I'm still seeing him advertised on Facebook, you know, his success principles and the courses he teaches. And, you know, he's still going for it. And in his, I think, I can't remember how old he is now, but he's just still going for it. He has one of those, he's got it all. He's got the creative aspect, he's got the commitment to people, he's got the drive for success, he's got the, you know, the just unending energy level to just keep this doing this. And that's a rare being to do it at that level.
And for those that don't know, Chicken Soup for the Soul, that's Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen. And it's the world record for sales in books. Like they are at the top of the food chain. So they have heard thousands and thousands of pitches from people that are living the dream and that they swear, I'm going to be the next Chicken Soup for the Soul. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. It's going to be me. Nothing's going to stop me. Bullshit. You know,
Mm-hmm.
very, very few people got the grit because it's work.
Yep.
It's work. And they think the talent is, maybe you're the best writer ever. So you think that's why it's going to catch fire. Nope. Sorry.
Yeah, things
You,
don't back to fire. Things don't simply just catch fire. There's some kind of process in there that creates it, whether it's, well, if we're talking literally fire, it's, you know, nature,
you
man-made.
got to make some sparks
Got
first.
to make some sparks, but yeah, I know.
And then you got to fuel it.
Yeah.
Then you got to fan it.
I'm glad when I started all of this, I think the naivete that I had was actually beneficial because I wasn't afraid to ask Jack Canfield for an endorsement, for his email address. I wasn't afraid to ask things. And it was at a time where it wasn't as saturated as it is now. You know, now it's just, it's, these people they're bombarded, you know, it's like, don't even, it's hard to even ask anybody anything because people are just bombarded, and you know, everybody's trying to write their book or create their dreams and all of that. But back then it was not quite, you know, because I heard about the publishing world earlier than that, you know, and I missed that part where it was if you had a master's degree and you could get a book deal because they looked at you as an expert, you were a therapist. As you know, I had a client who was her mother was a very well-known author, and she had a master's degree, and that was the credential that was looked for at that time. But you know, no longer. But I'm lucky that at least during that period, I had that go-getter-ness, and I had the naivete to not be afraid to ask people for things that now I have more concern, you know.
Well, somebody gives me an honorary doctorate in psychology. Yes, please. That's
Yeah.
good for marketing.
Yeah, true. It doesn't hurt for sure.
Dr. Mark.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
I
I
know.
like it.
I know. I'm getting my second master's right now. I'm getting a master's in fine arts or creative writing.
Oh,
So
wow.
I'm doing that, taking it very slowly, but that was a dream to have a doctorate degree. I do love being in school. I feel very fortunate to get to work on my education and
Oh,
keep.
with the scarf and the glasses, you got the PhD look to you.
Well, thank you, sir.
What else did we want to cover today? We talked about the fires. We talked about your books. I think we're about there, Kristen.
Yeah, well, we've covered a lot of ground. It's been really nice to talk with you and engage on all these different subjects. The hard ones, the sad ones, the tough ones, the places we don't know if we're going to make it through, as well as the things that really light us up. I mean, obviously, I'm much more lit up talking about this period of time, and but you know, like you said, if we didn't have the past that we had, we wouldn't have much to say or much to write about.
Yeah, that's the bottom line. Embrace it. Even if it's really shitty,
It's
embrace it. Because
really,
if you can survive it and then heal from it, get on the other side,
mm-hmm.
you can help others heal. And it's as simple as having the courage of telling your story, whether you do that through a book, Facebook Lives, a show like mine, using your story helps others.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to tell your story, that's where all the best speakers are from. And at the end of the day, when you hear the high-end speakers, it's always because they did something big, and like they climbed Mount Everest, or they're Jack Canfield and they're the world record authors. But they always did something big. You don't have a public speaker that are gonna pay $50,000 to have them show up on stage because they did nothing. And nobody wants to hear about the nothing that you did. They want to hear about the something that you did. The
Right.
bigger the something, the more value it has to the world, and people pay for it.
Right.
So, embrace the tough stuff and turn it into something for yourself.
And again, like we said earlier, even if that something is just helping one person, I mean, that's
Yeah.
enough too, because that whole not enough is a whole other conversation of comparing. Well, if I'm not, because I wanted to be a mini Jack Canfield, I had that motivation, and then it didn't happen the way I hoped it would happen, and then there was that disappointment of feeling like I failed rather than looking at what I accomplished. It was feeling like I had failed, and so that's because there's a trade-off. I mean, you want to be at that level, that, like we've been talking about, the level of investment. Your life is about that. And if that is that what you want your life to be about, or do you want to, I mean, I'm sitting, my dog is sleeping next to me on the couch, and I don't like leaving my dogs. We bought an RV and we started traveling around the country in an RV for our vacations instead of, I don't want to be
We're doing that. We got 2 dogs. We just bought a motorhome. We're doing the same thing.
nice. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that I had to look at a point of, do I want that level of life where I was going to speaking at workshops and events and, marketing myself at that level. Do I really want that? Do I want to be on the go like that? And my answer is no. I don't want to be on the go like that. I want to
Yeah.
be able to be home and present and, in my life, but I also want to find that, kind of rediscover for myself that, how can I do it at this level and not have to have it be this level? How can I just be here? So I think we're always adjusting.
I wanted to share a story / example. One of the guys that I had on my show years ago, and I'm still friends with him now, is Dana Meincke, and he doesn't mind me using his name or his story. So Dana is a world record holder for hiking. He's the only person alive that's done the entire Trans-Canada Trail to 3 different oceans. Nobody else has ever done it. So it's about 22,000 kilometers that he hiked. So he's a world record hiker and the only guy that's ever done the entire Trans-Canada Trail. It took him a decade. And absolutely nobody knows who he is.
Yeah.
Because he didn't do it for cancer, and he didn't do it for anything, and didn't have the ability to market himself. He's trying to now. I mean, he accomplished this years ago, but the big thing that he did, the unbelievable, huge task that he did, way bigger than climbing Everest. Like it's like climbing 10 Everests in bare feet is what he did. And that alone should be the reward, because you know that you did it. But for some people, if they do something big and then they get no adulation from it, like Dana, it can destroy you if you let it. If the adulation is why you did it,
Right.
it'll destroy you if that adulation doesn't happen.
Right.
But know that you did it. The accomplishment is its own reward. The fact that you did it, even if nobody's looking, that's the own reward. I mean, people don't know how much weight I lift getting ready, because I'm an arm wrestler. So, but I keep track of it, and it's like, oh, I could do, my pronation lift is up to 80 pounds. I know, my wife knows, my kids know, and that's about it, and nobody else knows, but I feel pretty damn good about it, because it was a lot of work to get up to that 80 pounds on my wrist. And my goal is 100. So when I hit 100, I'll feel like $1 million, and nobody's going to know except my wife and my kids, and maybe a couple of arm wrestlers that I hang out with, and that's it. Because it's, for me, that's 6 years of work in order to get there, and I'm really happy about it.
Yeah.
But just do it for yourself, I guess, is what I'm saying. Don't let it destroy you if you write a book and nobody buys it, or nobody cares, or you can't get a review. It's still a huge reward to get it done. Just get it done.
Right. I'm completely with you. Yep.
All right, sister. Well, stay on the line, and we'll wrap this up. How can people find you, and how can people find your books?
Well, I would love to have people go find the book wherever books are sold. It's called Phoenix Rising, Stories of Remarkable Women Walking Through Fire. And I'd love to get it in the hands of as many fire survivors as possible. And you can find out more about me on my website, KristenMoeller.com. That's KRISTEN, M as in Mary, OELLER.com.
Is there a way to market that through book clubs to try to suggest, hey, have this as your book club book?
That would be a really good idea.
Well, that one's for free. The next one costs you a nickel.
Find someone to help me with that. That's part of it, is finding help, if you're able to find help and not feel like you have to do it all by yourself. So
it was some book club in Boston. I think it was Boston. My book was their book of the month, and my first one, and they reached out to me to let me know. And I thought, that is just freaking great. A whole book club, which is probably, like 4 women, but it's okay. It's great. It's awesome. People are talking about my book. Yay.
Mm-hmm. Congratulations.
Yeah, exactly. I was happy with that. All right. Stay on the line, Kristen. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
All right. You're listening to Operation Tango Romeo, the trauma recovery podcast for veterans, first responders, and their families. If you would like to help save lives, relieve pain by making help for PTS injuries easily accessible, share like the sugar bear, because sharing is caring. Thanks, everybody.